And thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to today's hybrid New York City Council stated meeting. At this time, would all council members and staff please turn on their video? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent mode. Thank you for your cooperation. We are ready to begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please place all electronic devices to vibrate. Mr. Majority Leader.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Nice to see you. Welcome to the stated meeting of May 19th, 2022. I'm Majority Leader Keith Powers. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here today. If you are following along, the agenda for our meeting today is posted on the City Council's website.
Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Roll call.
Abreu.
Present.
Ariola.
Present.
Aviles.
Presente.
Ayala. Barron.
Here.
Botcher.
Present.
Brannan.
I'm here.
Brewer.
Yes, here.
Brooks Powers. Caban.
Present.
Carr.
Present.
De La Rosa.
Here.
Dinowitz.
Here.
Farias.
Present.
Felice.
Present.
Gennaro.
Here.
Gutierrez.
Presente.
Hanif.
Here.
Hanks.
Present.
Holden.
Here.
Hudson.
Here.
Joseph.
Present.
Kagan.
Present.
Krishnan.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lewis.
Present.
Marte.
Present.
Mealy.
Present.
Menon.
Present.
Moya. Narcisse.
Present.
Nurse.
Here.
Osei.
Present.
Palladino.
Present.
Ayala. Wrestler.
Here.
Richardson Jordan.
Present.
Riley.
Present.
Rivera.
Present.
Salamanca.
Present.
Sanchez.
Present.
Shulman.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Ung.
Present.
Velasquez.
Here.
Vernikov.
Present.
Williams.
Present.
Juan.
Present.
Yeager.
Here.
Borelli.
Present.
Powers.
Unlike the Minority Leader, I'm not in a bar and I'm present.
Speaker Adams.
I am here with the Majority Leader. I'm present.
Thank you. We're now going to have today's invocation, which will be delivered by Denise Rusorikrai, the Executive Pastor of Hope Astoria Church, located at 3614 35th Street in Astoria, Queens. Welcome, you can come on up.
Good afternoon. As I pray today, I'm mindful of other faith traditions in the room. I'll be praying from the perspective of a Christian. Let's pray together. Father God, we thank you for giving us life, purpose, and the chance today to serve others in a meaningful way. God, we thank you for our home, for New York City. We thank you that you know and love every person in this city. Each one of them is known by name by you, and you care about their well-being. We remember before you as well and take a moment of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the recent Buffalo shooting and all who have been injured or killed by violence in our city. Today we pray that you would help us to join in the work that you are doing to renew all things and to bring about what is just and good. Have your way in us, in our actions and our decisions, in our words and in the attitudes of our hearts, that what is pleasing to you would be accomplished. Lord, we thank you for our elected officials and for all who serve the people of this city. We pray for your protection, your wisdom, your leadership, and your covering over them and their families. We pray for your grace over their efforts today, that they would accomplish much good for all the people of this city. We pray also for your mercy and grace over New York City, that our city and all its people, in all their beautiful diversity, could thrive. We know that in all things, Lord, you are sovereign and you are good. We praise you for who you are. You are holy, and we thank you for your love for us. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to now ask Councilmember Julie Won to spread the invocation on the record.
Thank you, Majority Leader Powers and Pastor Rika Sorai, who has served in my community and my district for almost 2 years in Astoria, from Hope Astoria Church, and the church network of Hope Church, which has 8 churches across the city. But before I do anything else, I just want to acknowledge the victims of the Buffalo supermarket shooting by name: Celestine Cheney, Roberta Jury, Andre McNeil, Catherine Massey, Margus Morrison, Hayward Patterson, Aaron Salter Jr., Geraldine Talley, Ruth Whitfield, Paul Young. And I would also like to acknowledge all of the women, the Korean women who have been shot, yet their names are much harder to find from the Texas shooting as well. In time of such darkness, I am thankful for our invocations where we can continue to ground each other in all of our shared faiths, to remember that we have been elected to serve in vulnerability as well as with faith, to remember to serve those who are most vulnerable and those who are hurting and those who have lost their lives. And just to acknowledge Hope Church Astoria, in my district throughout the pandemic, they have served to make sure that people have food on the table through Ravenswood and NYCHAs, as well as in the local hospitals, and all the work that they're doing just to serve the community. And I am just grateful and honored to bring Pastor Denise here today to speak before the council in the city, and I make a motion for unanimous consent to spread the invocation in full upon the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember. We're now going to have the adoption of the minutes by Councilmember Camilla Hanks.
Thank you, Majority Leader Powers. I make a motion that the minutes of the stated meeting of April 28th, 2022 be adopted as printed.
Thank you. We're going to move to messages and papers from the mayor.
None.
Communication from city, county, and borough offices.
M62, City Planning Commission appointment.
Filed pursuant to letter of withdrawal.
M63, discount rate.
Finance.
Preconsidered M64 and 65, budget modifications.
Finance.
Petitions and communications.
None.
Land use call-ups.
M66, EMS station.
Coupled on call-up vote, I would now ask that the clerk take a roll call vote on today's land use call-up.
Abreu.
Aye.
Ariola.
Aye.
Is that the wrong answer?
Aviles. Land use call-ups.
Yes.
Thank you. Ayala.
Aye.
Barron.
This is just a land use call-up. It's not reconsidered M62, correct?
You're correct. Land use call-ups.
All right.
Thank you. Botcher.
Aye.
Brannan.
Aye.
Brewer.
Aye.
Brooks Powers.
Aye.
Caban.
Aye.
Carr.
Aye.
De La Rosa.
Aye.
Dinowitz.
Aye.
Farias.
Aye.
Feliz.
Aye.
Gennaro.
Aye.
Gutierrez.
Aye.
Hanif.
Aye.
Hanks.
Aye.
Holden.
Aye.
Hudson.
Aye.
Joseph.
Aye.
Kagan.
Aye.
Krishnan.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lewis.
Aye.
Marte.
Aye.
Mealy.
Aye.
Menon.
Aye.
Moya.
Aye.
Narcisse.
Aye.
Nurse.
Aye.
Osei.
Aye.
Palladino.
Aye.
Wrestler.
Aye.
Richardson Jordan.
Aye.
Riley.
Aye.
Rivera.
I vote aye.
Salamanca.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Sanchez.
Aye.
Schulman.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
Ung.
Aye.
Velasquez.
Aye.
Vernikov. Williams.
Aye.
Juan.
Aye.
Yeager.
Aye.
Borelli.
Aye.
Powers.
Aye.
Speaker Adams.
Aye.
Today's land use call-ups are adopted by a vote of 51 in the affirmative and 0 in the negative. We'll now hear and have communication from Speaker Adrian Adams.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see you, and it is great to be seen. As a reminder, masks are highly encouraged to be worn throughout the stated meeting in these chambers. Let's take the necessary precautions to keep ourselves and our fellow New Yorkers safe. Today, we're voting on several legislative, land use, and finance items. Before we begin, though, I would like to discuss what unfolded last Saturday. White supremacist violence inflicted on Buffalo, New York's Black community. It took the lives of 10 community members and injured 3 others in what was the deadliest mass shooting of this year. And today we wear black ribbons. Thank you, Councilmember Farias, for ensuring that we have these in commemoration of those victims. Because we lost mothers, fathers, sisters and brothers, aunts and uncles, grandmothers and grandfathers on Saturday. They were caretakers, public servants, and writers. Each of them were valued members of the Buffalo community, each with their own unique experiences and stories. We must continue to show support and send our strength to the families and communities impacted by this act of terror and violence. We pray for the community and survivors' recovery from physical and emotional trauma, as well as the health and safety of the people of Buffalo during these trying times. This racist violence is so traumatic for so many of us. The pain and suffering caused by the stain of racism and white supremacy is all too familiar for so many Black families and communities. Its history in this country is long, and the ideology that perpetuates it is once again being mainstreamed to target us and so many others, but we can't let that happen. In fact, the hateful belief that seeks to otherize Black people, immigrants, and people of color more broadly to cast us as threats is vile and it's dangerous. And we see its effect in last weekend's tragedy. The anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, anti-them within that ideology must be denounced. The impact is not just what we saw in Buffalo last weekend. It is the increase in hate crimes and violence that we're experiencing right here in our own city. This hate violence that has targeted our diverse communities is intended to strike fear and make us feel unsafe. But we won't let it. Our Asian, Jewish, LGBTQ, Sikh, Muslim, and Black communities have been the targets of this hate in despicable acts. We must be united as New Yorkers in standing against all of it, leaving no space for it to take root and grow. As the most diverse city council in our city's history, we have a responsibility to lead in ensuring our city prevents and responds to hate crimes. That's why we've called for this budget to include at least $5 million to support its focus by the city and community-based programs. We must root out hate in all of its forms. Social media companies also have a responsibility. Hate has been allowed to fester, spread, and disseminate on social media and online gaming platforms, with not enough action taken to ensure these companies don't make space to profit from them. These companies have a responsibility to do more and should be held accountable. They are allowing dangerous and irresponsible content to reach those most susceptible, including our children and youth, and influence them with hate. And we see how it can quickly manifest into violence and harm. As a country, we must address the irresponsible and dangerous proliferation of guns that fuels the violence hurting our communities. The overwhelming access and presence of guns in this nation is literally killing us. It makes all of the violence more deadly, whether it's interpersonal or hate-driven. Guns are not manufactured in New York City, and we have some of the toughest gun laws, but they still flow into our communities. The federal government, in partnership with the state and city partners, must take stronger action to enact sensible laws that curb this violence and protect public safety. Inaction will only lead to further tragedies and deaths, and our communities are tired. They've had enough of this violence. In the last 2 weeks alone, our own council member, Pirina Sanchez, and her team were forced to run for cover because shots were fired near her district office in the Bronx. Thankfully, they weren't physically harmed, but someone else in the community was. Neighbors ran for their lives, parents held their children close, and everyone was left with trauma, whether it was immediately recognized or not. Councilmember Sanchez, you said it best when you said, quote, "We shouldn't have to think twice about walking down our own block, whether our kids can play in the garden," end quote, and we're so glad that you're here today. We must all be outraged by this continued violence. Earlier this week, we lost 11-year-old Kiara Tay to a senseless shooting in Councilmember Salamanca's district in the Bronx. This precious little girl was struck and killed by a stray bullet from someone who was out to inflict harm on another person that day. We mourn Kiara's loss. We grieve with her family, and we send our love to the traumatized residents of the Bronx. We've also learned more about the death of 9-year-old Shalom Gafaro in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, who was reportedly abused in her very own home. She was helpless as she was beaten. An investigation is underway, but what we do know is that this harm to our children is unacceptable. It speaks to a lack of well-being and means that our city failed this child and failed her family. We have to work to ensure nothing like this happens again by protecting our babies, our children, our future. As I've said in the past, violence is a public health crisis, and we must treat it with urgency and bold solutions. The safety and well-being of our children, families, and communities are at stake, and we all deserve to live in peace, not in fear. Last week, our country reached the grim and tragic milestone of surpassing 1 million COVID-19 deaths. Most of us, myself included, have lost loved ones, friends, neighbors, and community members to this virus, and we will always remember them. We must continue to protect ourselves and each other through this pandemic, but we also need healing from trauma and grief caused by COVID. As we reflect on the 1 million Americans whom we've lost, and millions more around the world, we honor their memories now and always. And finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that our city has lost several New Yorkers to workplace violence. Ziwen Yang, a food delivery worker in Forest Hills. Councilmember Schulman's district was killed during a delivery on April 30th. Curtis Rippey, a security guard from Corona, was fatally stabbed during an argument with 2 men at a gas station. And Ulugbek Gilazov, a grocery worker in Midwood, was stabbed during an argument that broke out inside a supermarket just 2 days ago. We also mourn the passing of retired FDNY Lieutenant John Vigliotti of Engine Company 159, a lifelong Staten Island resident who served our city in the fire department for 30 years. We pray for their families, and we stand with workers and our partners in labor who advocate for better and safer working conditions for all. Let us now stand for a moment of silence to remember the 10 individuals taken from us in Buffalo, the 1 million lives lost to COVID-19, the children who have been harmed by violence, and the workers who lost their lives while on the job. Thank you. Okay, so on a lighter and happier note, we're going to pick it up. I want to congratulate Councilmember Lincoln Ressler on his wedding earlier this month. And I also want to congratulate my special counsel, Carlos Beato, on his wedding to the beautiful Zoe. Congratulations to both of you. This month, we're observing a number of holidays and celebrations, including Haitian Flag Day. Woohoo! A day to celebrate the culture and heritage of Haiti, Haiti, one of the first countries in the Caribbean to gain independence from colonial rule. Sac passe. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is an important reminder to all of us that we must continue to provide the support and resources for people with mental health challenges and their families. It is imperative that we end the stigma around mental health that has prevented the appropriate care in our communities for far too long. It is also Lupus Awareness Month, a time when we raise awareness around the physical and emotional toll of lupus. To that end, I want to thank Councilmember Shahana Hanif for all of the incredible work she's done to inform fellow New Yorkers about the impacts of this chronic illness. Thank you, Councilmember. I also want to acknowledge that May is National Foster Care Month. More than 407,000 children in the United States are in foster care, and I want to thank all of the foster parents, mentors, child care professionals, and others who assist our foster youth find permanent homes and stability. Thank you, Councilmember Gail Brewer. Additionally, I'd like to thank Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala for partnering with Children's Aid and my staff to host Foster Youth Shadow Day, allowing foster youth to meet council members and learn about the importance of local government. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And one final announcement, I must inform you all of a major departure from our team at Central Staff. It is the incomparable Raju Mann. Heavy sigh. Yes, heavy sigh, heavy sigh. Yes, Raju, Deputy Chief of Staff and Director of the Land Use Division, will be leaving the council at the end of this month after 8 energetic and eventful years of service. Raju came on board in 2014 as the only second individuals to serve as Director of the Land Use Division in the history of the New York City Council since 1999. From guiding members through countless negotiations on neighborhood rezonings and private development proposals, to pushing administrations to advance and improve crucial citywide policies on affordable housing, economic development, infrastructure, and planning, Raju has served the council and the city of New York with a rare combination of policy brilliance and political savvy, and he's done it well. Raju, you will be greatly missed by our team. Nobody can fill those shoes, Raju, but we're looking for that perfect size. In the meantime, we must move on. So now let's go ahead and dive into our agenda for the day. We will be voting on the following land use items. Broadway Triangle Bartlett Crossing Development, an application by HPD to facilitate the construction of a 9-story, 100% affordable residential building with 29 units in Councilmember Ressler's district. 2300 Cropsey Avenue rezoning will facilitate the construction of a new 23-story mixed-use building and allow ground floor commercial use in the rezoning area in Councilmember Brannan's district. 35-01 Vernon Boulevard rezoning will facilitate the development of a 9-story mixed-use building with 107 dwelling units, of which 26 will be affordable in Councilmember Wan's district. Thank you, staff, which include Brian Paul, James Catone, and Tim Anderson. We will also be voting on the following finance items. Transparency Resolution number 13 of fiscal year 2022, sponsored by Councilmember Brannan, approving the new designation and changes of the designation of certain organizations receiving funding in the expense budget. An expense budget modification that represents proposed movements of city funds within and among city agencies in fiscal 2022 to implement changes in the city's expense budget, but leaves the overall level of city funds unchanged. A revenue budget modification that seeks to appropriate new city revenues in fiscal year 2022 in the amount of $1.36 billion. The $1.36 billion of new revenues combined with an adjustment to the general reserve will be used to prepay $1.54 billion of fiscal year 2023 expenses in fiscal year 2022. A preconsidered resolution that approves an exemption from real property taxes for property located at 788 Fox Street in the Bronx in Deputy Speaker Ayala's district. The project is a 5-story mixed building with 5 commercial spaces, which closed in 2017 with a construction loan used to do a moderate rehabilitation in the building. There are 52 units, and all are currently rate stabilized with AMIs ranging from 50% to 80%. We thank staff, Malcolm Buthorn. The multitasking Malcolm Buthorn, I might say. Next, we will vote on the following appointments. David Doe, Commissioner of the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission, and Robert Hogan, member of the New York City Civilian Complaint Review Board. Thank you to our staff, Lance Pallavi. Finally, we will be voting on the following legislation. First on the legislative agenda, Resolution 121, sponsored by Councilmember Natasha Williams, would call on the New York State Legislature to pass the Clean Slate Act, which would automatically seal conviction records after someone has completed their sentence, is off parole or probation, has not incurred any new charges or convictions in New York State during a set number of years, and the conviction to be sealed is not a sex offense. In New York, more than 2.3 million people have old conviction records, which often block them from accessing housing, education, employment, and other economic opportunities. The Clean Slate Act would not only remove this barrier, opening up doors of opportunity for millions of New Yorkers, it would also boost the state's economy. We lose out on $2 billion in lost wages each year by blocking people with old records from jobs. It makes no sense for public safety or the economy to stand and obstruct people from opportunities to move forward in their lives after exiting the justice system. That's why this state bill has broad and diverse support from criminal justice advocates, labor unions, and the business community. We look forward to the state legislature passing Clean Slate during this legislative session. And we like to thank staff, Jayasari Gampathi, for your hard work. Today, we're also voting on 4 home rule messages related to pensions. New Yorkers work night and day to ensure the city keeps moving and stays safe. We must invest in these hardworking New Yorkers' futures. The first home rule relates to member retirement program contributions for some members under age 57 who, due to their enrollment dates, cannot meet the 25-year service requirements for using specific benefits for which they make contributions. This bill would address that disparity and exempt members who are unable to receive the benefits from the requirement to make additional contributions. The second relates to automotive members of the NYC Employee Retirement System. This would provide automotive members of the New York City Employees Retirement System, or NYCERS, who begin their careers later in life with the ability to receive a vested retirement benefit. The third relates to allowing police or fire members of the FDNY pension fund to get credit for EMT service. This will give Tier 3 members of the New York City Fire Department pension fund who have prior creditable service as an EMT with the FDNY the ability to receive Fire Department pension service credit for their service. It would also allow members to apply up to 3 prior years of service as a NYCERS EMT to their fire pension retirement, as long as the service years with NYCERS directly precedes their current membership in the fire pension. And finally, the fourth home rule would create a 25-year plan for fire protection inspectors. It would also provide uniformed fire service personnel the opportunity to retire with a full pension after 25 years of service. It would grant them parity with other uniformed service personnel who perform essential tasks, including police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and other uniformed service employees. I'm very happy that the state is moving on these items, and I'm proud to support them. Thank you, staff members Rachel Cordero and Jayasari Ganapathy, for your work. Finally, we will vote on a legislative package concerning fire safety that seeks to address outstanding issues discovered from investigation into the tragedy our city and the Bronx experienced at the beginning of the year. As we saw earlier this year in Councilmember Felice's district and adjacent to Councilmember Sanchez's district, the tragic fire at the 19-story Twin Parks Northwest apartment building in the Fordham section of the Bronx claimed the lives of 17 New Yorkers, including 8 children. It was one of the worst tragedies in the history of our city and the city's worst fire in 30 years. Investigators discovered several violations and flaws that led to it to have such a disastrous result. If proper measures were put in place, our fellow New Yorkers would still be with us today. And as a result, the council established the Twin Parks Citywide Task Force for Fire Safety, led by Councilmember Felice, which has worked with other communities to address these many, many issues. Our city has experienced an uptake in devastating fires in all 5 boroughs, including another blaze in the Bronx just this month, not far from the Twin Parks apartment building that claimed the life of beloved 73-year-old grandmother and injured 9 other people. This package of legislation will help decrease the likelihood that tragedies like the Twin Parks fire occur again. In honor of those we lost, we will continue to correct these wrongs, and I'd like to thank Council Members Felice, Sanchez, Hanif, and Carr for their leadership on this critical issue. Introduction 104A, sponsored by Councilmember Oswald Felice, Chair of the Twin Parks Citywide Task Force on Fire Prevention, would establish a definition for the term self-closing door, so it is clear that applicable doors must return to the closed position and latch shut when opened and released. Introduction 105A, also sponsored by Chair Felice, would make some modifications to the enforcement of Local Law 111, which required that doors providing access to interior corridors or stairs be self-closing or equipped with devices to ensure closing after having been opened. That local law also placed responsibility on owners of multiple dwellings to keep and maintain self-closing doors in good repair, and made failure to do so an immediately hazardous violation. First, Introduction 105A amends the correction period from 21 days to 14 days and requires the Department of Housing Preservation and Development to conduct a follow-up inspection within 20 business days following the correction period. Second, the bill increases the civil penalty for self-closing door violations to $250 to $500 and an additional $250 per day for each day the violation condition remains after the deadline to correct. Third, Introduction 105A increases the penalty for false certification of correction of a hazardous violation to $250 to $500 and an immediately hazardous violation to $500 to $1,000. Lastly, the bill clarifies that self-closing doors must return to the closed position and self-latch when opened and released. Introduction 106A, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, would prohibit the sale of portable electric space heaters without certain safety features that are designed to mitigate the fire risk posed by operation of such devices. Specifically, any such device would have to be equipped with a thermostat, an automatic function that disables the device upon tip over or overheating, and be certified by a nationally recognized testing laboratory. Anyone who violates the ban would face civil penalties that escalate upon subsequent violations. Introduction 131A, sponsored by Councilmember Pirina Sanchez, would amend current requirements relating to the fire department's efforts to conduct fire safety education and outreach for residential buildings by requiring that such activities include dissemination of relevant information pertaining to the safe operation of electric space heaters in residential settings. Additionally, the bill requires that any written materials disseminated by FDNY pertaining to fire safety education must be made available in the top 10 languages most commonly spoken within the city. Introduction 155A, sponsored by Councilmember David Carr, would waive permit filing fees for owners of one to three family homes who are looking to repair the damage caused by a fire and to correct any construction defects discovered following the fire. The waiver would apply to other dwellings in the same homeowners or cooperative association with the same construction defect. Thank you to staff Rachel Cordero, Joshua Kingsley, William Hongdak, Brian Reed, Audrey Sun, Jose Conde, and Charles Kim. Thank you, colleagues, for your attention. Now I will turn it back into the hands of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're going to head into general orders. I just want to also say a very big word in both my condolences and congratulations to our friend Raju Mann, who has been an outstanding part of the City Council for the last at least 5 years since I've been here, and I've worked very, very close with on a number of items, including the East Midtown rezoning and a number of large-scale projects. And I've already told him I'm very upset with him, and he knows that, but I'm also very happy for him as well. We are now going to move into general orders, and we're going to start with Councilmember Carr.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I just wanted to mention a number of thank yous in anticipation of the passage of my legislation today. This was introduced because of a terrible fire that took place on Staten Island, where it was discovered after the fact that the fire was facilitated or caused by a defect in the building that also affected the rest of the condominium developments. And so this legislation is intended to help victims of fire, as well as those who are looking to correct defects that they discovered due to a fire in their neighbors' homes and get the free permit that they should get in order to facilitate that kind of work. And so I want to thank the Speaker for her support, Minority Leader Borelli for all of his support and guidance as always, Chairs Sanchez, Arreola, and Felice for their leadership on this issue, as well as their respective team support, Peter Spencer from the Minority Leader's Office, my Chief of Staff, Giuseppe Desario, Audrey Sun from the Committee on Housing and Buildings, Jeff Baker, and on the admin side, Jake Capistran, and I urge all my colleagues to vote in the yes.
Thank you. We go to Councilmember Abreu.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Today we'll be voting on 4 home rules passed this morning out of the State and Federal Legislation Committee, which I proudly chair. They call on the state to pass and the governor to sign legislation supporting the pension and retirement system for our essential workers. These home rules would authorize emergency responders to obtain credit for service as EMT members, exempt public servants from having to make contributions that they would not be in service long enough to benefit from, allow automotive workers who began their careers late in life to vest and give fire service personnel parity with other uniformed service personnel. These home rules would help give hardworking New Yorkers the retirement benefits that they deserve. I call on this body to pass them. I'd like to thank Speaker Adams and Special Counsel Carlos Beato. Additionally, I'd like to thank committee staff Jay Asri, Ganapathy, William Diori, Hector Hilmang, and my Deputy Chief of Staff, Jaleesa Quigley. Majority Leader, back to you.
I accept. We'll go to Councilmember Feliz and then Councilmember Ressler.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Fire safety continues to be a challenge affecting our entire city, and especially my home of the Bronx, a borough that has been plagued with fires for so many years and so many decades. We have so much work to do on that topic, including first, tackling all the causes of fire, including, as we're doing today, the use of space heaters. Tackling all the causes, but also, number two, ensuring that if there is a fire, families have all the tools to safely escape. There was one tool that could have prevented that devastating, unspeakable tragedy in Twin Parks. One tool, properly working self-closing doors. Had those self-closing doors worked, smoke wouldn't have filled that 19-story high-rise, and families would have been able to safely escape the fire and the tragedy. The defective self-closing doors allowed this fire, which occurred in a fireproof building, allowed that fire to turn into the tragedy that we saw, wherein we lost 17 angels, 17 innocent lives. These bills will help ensure that another tragedy like the one that we saw, that ugly Sunday morning in the Bronx, it'll help ensure that another tragedy never happens again, not in the Bronx, not anywhere in the city of New York. These bills will help ensure that self-closing door laws are being scrupulously followed, honored, and enforced by ensuring that first, landlords fix violation within 14 days, and also after that 14-day period, there's a mandatory inspection to confirm that that self-closing door violation has been fixed. And also increasing civil penalties and fines for bad actors, including landlords who falsely state that they have fixed self-closing door violations. Self-closing doors can save lives. They prevent fires and smoke from spreading. They prevent fires and smoke from harming others. Mr. Majority Leader, I see my time is up. If I could briefly conclude.
Yes, go ahead.
So today we're taking action to make sure that these doors are closing to protect our families. And briefly, I want to thank everyone that helped make these bills possible. First, I want to thank our Speaker, Adrian Adams. Thank you so much for making fire safety a priority for this City Council. Also want to thank our Fire Safety Task Force, including Council members Sanchez, Ariola, Aviles, and Farias. Also want to thank everyone who was working behind the scenes. Jeremy, John, it's been such a pleasure working with you on these bills. Thank you for all the help. Also, my entire team, including my General Counsel, Lieutenant Doro Gonzalez. Prior to me getting elected to the City Council, he and I were housing lawyers defending tenants in Bronx Housing Court. Also, last but not least, want to thank those that were on the ground helping those affected families, including the Gambian Youth Organization, including Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson, including Congressmember Richie Torres. Thank you so much. These bills will save lives. Thank you so much.
We'll go to Councilmember Ressler and then Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the kind words, and also just want to echo the sentiment. Raja, you've done a superb job. We are going to miss you a lot. I couldn't be prouder that the first land use action that I have a chance to vote on from the 33rd Council District is the Broadway Triangle. About 14 years ago, then Brooklyn Machine boss Vito Lopez struck a sweetheart corrupt deal with HPD that was discriminatory to redevelop the largest open site in all of North Brooklyn, the Broadway Triangle. We decided to fight back. We set up weekly meetings where I met a young lawyer who was still, I think, a law student at the time, a gangly kid named Shekhar Krishnan, who went on to represent us. I met a junior staffer to the local council member named Antonio Reynoso. The Broadway Triangle Community Coalition was chaired by Juan Ramos, who now leads Los Sures, and Rob Solano. Many great community activists were there. We met every week. We organized. Ultimately, we litigated, and thanks in part to Shekhar's great leadership, we won. When I had the privilege of working in the previous administration, I worked on the settlement deal to ensure that there was a good outcome for both the Williamsburg and the Bedford-Stuyvesant communities of the Broadway Triangle. And I am incredibly proud that I had the opportunity to help work on the RFP that was ultimately put out to ensure that Latino and Jewish and diverse organizations all work together to redevelop this site. So we have the leading community-based organizations in our community, and this site is the crossroads of Councilmember Gutierrez and Councilmember Osei and my districts, where Williamsburg and Bushwick and Bedside all come together. And the diversity of our community is going to redevelop this site. High-quality, nonprofit community development corporations. This is the largest open site in North Brooklyn, and we are now ensuring, finally, after 14 years of fighting, that this site is going to be a place where Jews and Latinos and African Americans all live together, because that's what Brooklyn's about, and that's what we're achieving at the Broadway Triangle. And I really want to thank everybody who contributed to the activism to make this happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I'd like to speak briefly in support of David Doe's appointment as chair of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. I have spoken with David about his perspective, experience, and vision for the commission, and I believe he will serve as TLC chair, working to address the pressing economic issues facing our city's taxi cab and for hire drivers. I'd also like to speak in support of Robert Hogan's appointment to the Civilian Complaint Review Board. As a longtime advocate for Southeast Queens working at Life Camp and overseeing cure violence and crisis management system programs, Robert will bring extensive experience and good judgment to his new position. I look forward to seeing him work to ensure that our police department is accountable to all New Yorkers. I'd also like to voice my support for Reso 121, calling on the state to pass the Clean Slate Act. Once a person serves a sentence, it's only right that their convictions shouldn't hang over their heads, keeping them locked out of economic opportunity in connection with their communities. This is particularly true for people of color who bear the worst outcomes of the system. This meaningful legislation will change New Yorkers' lives for the better. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to move into the report of special committees.
None.
Report of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Finance, Preconsidered Reso 160, Transparency Resolution.
Coupled on general orders.
Preconsidered M64 and Reso 175, and Preconsidered M65 and Reso 176, Budget Modifications.
Coupled on general orders.
Preconsidered LU 60 and Reso 177, Tax Exemption.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Fire and Emergency Management, Intros 106A and 131A, Electric Space Heaters.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Housing and Buildings, Intros 104A and 105A, Self-Closing Doors.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 155A, Permit Filing Fees.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Land Use, LU 39, 146-93, Guy Brewer Boulevard rezoning.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197-D of the New York City Charter.
LU 40 and Reso 178, 146-93, Guy Brewer Boulevard rezoning.
Coupled to be filed pursuant to letter of withdrawal.
LUs 41 and 42, 103 Lee Avenue.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197D of the New York City Charter.
LU 46 and Reso 179 Broadway Triangle.
Coupled on general orders.
LU 47 and Reso 180, 2300 Cropsey Avenue.
Coupled on general orders.
LU 48 and Reso 181 and LU 49 and Reso 182. 3501 Vernon Boulevard rezoning.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Rules, Privileges, and Elections, M49 and Reso 183, approving the appointment of David Doe, TLC.
Coupled on general orders.
M60 and Reso 184, approving the appointment of Robert Hogan, CCRB.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on State and Federal Legislation, Preconsidered SLRs 1 through 4.
Coupled on general orders.
Resolution appointing various persons, Commissioner of Deeds.
Coupled on general orders, and I would now ask that the clerk take a roll call vote on all of the items coupled on today's general orders calendar.
Holden.
Majority Leader, I'd like to make a motion for unanimous consent to vote on all land use items and all items on the general order calendar.
You can go ahead and vote.
I vote aye on all.
Moya.
I vote aye on all.
Salamanca.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. First, I would like to recognize a great loss in the council, and that is Mr. Raju Mann. The speaker said it best. Raju, being able to work with all of my colleagues and myself and getting projects to the finish line was masterful, and you will be missed. And I just want to say thank you, Raju. Second, on a sad note, on Monday at 4:50 p.m., the family of Kiara K was coming to terms with the unimaginable. Their baby, an innocent 11-year-old child, was not coming home. While walking down the street with a family member during the broad daylight, a bright, promising child who had her whole life to live was shot and killed in the lonely section of the Bronx. The culprits, individuals who decided they would turn our city streets into a war zone with gun violence. As a father and a product of the South Bronx, I am heartbroken and I am angry. I am heartbroken for the parents who have to do something no parent should ever have to do by burying their child. And I'm angry because people who have no business being on our streets are taking our friends, family, and community members away from us. Just last month, another innocent 16-year-old Angelique Yambo was killed as she walked home from school with her friends in my council district. We can no longer just offer these families our thoughts and prayers. We need to give them justice. In Black and Brown communities, we are suffering from an epidemic that other neighborhoods in the city only hear about in the news. The epidemic, illegal guns, and gun violence. The current system is broken, and my constituents are paying the consequences with their lives. If we really do value human life as a society, we must demand action to close the revolving door of the criminal justice system. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you. Abreu.
Aye.
Ariola.
Aye on all.
Aviles.
Aye on all.
Ayala.
Aye.
Barron.
May I be excused to explain my vote? I did have my hand raised to speak during the discussion on the general order count. It was not acknowledged. Did
Apologies.
You not see it?
You can go ahead.
So I'm going to take a few more minutes. But first, I would like to acknowledge that the speaker neglected to mention the birthday of one of our greatest leaders, El-Haj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X. The picture that adorns my wall in the back, a portrait of him. Malcolm X was one of our greatest leaders, and we should never, ever not mention the work he's done. I'll mention more about that during discussion time, but Malcolm X joined, he would have been 97 years old today, and he joins his lovely wife, powerful sister, Dr. Betty Shabazz, and his daughter, Malika Shabazz, who died recently. So we must always honor Malcolm X. We should never leave him out. I want to, on the preconsidered M64, the transfer of money, my colleagues, I know they all voted for it in the Finance Committee, but you got to watch this one. If you read the whole thing, the amount of money that's being transferred from every agency, including $100 million from CUNY, including $100 million plus from the Department of Education. Money is being transferred, and then they, in a slick way, transfer a small amount of money from the police department. But then when you read the second part of it, it says from all these agencies, and then to over $300 million is being transferred to the police department right under your nose in this transfer resolution. We should all vote against that, and let's take the budget to its final conclusion and not have him transfer money from vital agencies, Department of Agency, Department of, Aging, Health, all of that. This M64, Reso 175, transfers money. Read it yourself. Don't take my word for it. Read it yourself. It'll say from a whole bunch of agencies, and it'll say to. The only agency that has an increase of $200 million is an NYPD. We should not vote for this.
We need your vote.
We should vote this down. So I'm voting no on that. And then I'm also voting no on LU 48, Reso 182, LU 49, 181, and LU 49, 182. It's only 25% affordable. And then I'm abstaining from M49, Reso 183, and M60, Reso 184. I abstain.
Thank you. Salamanca, will you verify your vote, please?
Yes, I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Butcher.
Aye.
Brennan.
Aye.
Brewer.
I vote aye, and I'm impressed with the two people who were nominated, TLC and CCRB. Thank you.
Thank you. Brooks Powers.
I vote aye, and I wish to congratulate in advance Councilmember Williams on the passage of the Clean Slate Bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Caban. Gotta come back.
Can we come back to her?
Sure.
She had to step out.
Carr.
Aye on all.
De La Rosa.
Aye.
Dinowitz.
Aye.
Farias.
I vote aye on all.
Feliz.
Aye on all.
Gennaro.
I vote aye, and I wish to be associated with the remarks of Councilmember Salamanca regarding closing the revolving door in the criminal justice system. I mourn for his constituents who have suffered violence, and for mine as well, and all of us who have suffered violence in our district. As I said, I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Gutierrez.
Aye on all, and we'll miss you, Raju. Good luck.
Hanif.
Permission to explain my vote?
Yep, go ahead.
I'm excited to be voting on my first piece of local legislation today. If passed, Intro 106A will ensure that space heaters are as safe as possible in order to prevent future tragedies. This legislation will require all space heaters sold in New York City to be equipped with 1, a thermostat, 2, an automatic function that disables the heater upon overheating or tipping over, and 3, safety certification from a nationally recognized testing laboratory. These safety measures would significantly reduce the risk of a heater causing a horrific fire as happened in the tragic and avoidable Twin Parks fire. Along with the other bills on today's agenda, this legislation would further our collective mission of creating a safer city. Thank you, Speaker Adams, for including Intro 106A on today's agenda. Thank you to Public Advocate Williams and Councilmember Sanchez, Powers, and Feliz for introducing this bill with me, and to Councilmember Feliz specifically for your continued leadership on this issue in the face of immeasurable pain and grief. Thank you to Councilmember Ariola for shepherding this bill through the Fire and Emergency Management Committee, and thank you to a majority of the council for signing on as sponsors. I want to thank my Legislative Director, Alex Liao, Communications Director, Michael Whitesides, and Chief of Staff, Nora Brickner, for their work. And thank you to council staff, including Chris Pepe, Rachel Cordero, and Josh Kingsley for their critical support throughout the legislative process. Finally, I want to thank the advocacy and work of the grassroots community groups, like the Gambian Youth Organization that sprang into action after the fire, and all others across the city to support the residents. They've been tireless advocates for meeting the needs of those affected and addressing the root causes of this avoidable tragedy. I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Caban.
Yes, thank you. I am voting aye on all with the exception of pre-considered M64 and M65, on which I abstain.
Thank you. Hanks.
Aye on all.
Hudson.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Joseph.
Aye on all.
Kagan.
Aye on all.
Krishnan.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Thank you. First, with regards to pre-considered resolution 160, I wish to make a disclosure that my wife is an employee of the Bronx Defenders, and on more meaningfully on land use 46, which Councilmember Ressler spoke about. It is very meaningful to vote on this today for all the reasons that Councilmember Ressler mentioned. The Broadway Triangle litigation was my first case out of law school that stayed with me for 13 years, and through the incredibly inspiring work of the Broadway Triangle Community Coalition, we reached a landmark settlement under the Fair Housing Act that produced the project that we're voting on today, and that also led to the racial impact study in the city of New York. And I was so fortunate through it to work closely with Councilmember Ressler, Councilmember Gutierrez, Borough President Reynoso, and of course, meaningfully too, it's how I met Raju Man as well in the council. So thank you for your work too, and sad to see you go, but appreciate all you've done, and congrats on your next step too. And with that in mind, I vote yes. Aye on all.
Thank you. Lee.
Aye on all.
Lewis.
Aye on all, and congratulations to Councilmember Williams on the passage of the bill.
Marte.
Aye on all.
Mealy.
Aye.
Menon.
Aye on all.
Narcisse.
Aye.
Nurse.
Aye on all, abstain on M64 and Reso 175.
Thank you. Osei.
Aye on all.
Palladino.
Aye on all.
Restler.
Aye on all, and I was remiss in just failing to properly thank and recognize Councilmember Gutierrez for all of her great work on the Broadway Triangle Community Coalition as well. So thank you, Jen.
Richardson Jordan.
So I'm also going to be a no on 64 and 65. Aye on all the rest.
Thank you. One moment. Riley.
Aye.
Rivera.
I vote aye.
Sanchez.
I vote aye. Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
I just want to congratulate Council Members Hanif and Councilmember Felice for passage of the first package of bills relating to the tragic fire at Twin Parks Northwest. And I also want to say that we continue to work as a council on this legislation. The bills that are passing today are addressing the proximate causes, the immediate causes, the space heater, self-closing door violations. They're addressing the immediate causes, and we're going to continue to work on this problem, holding landlords accountable, modernizing our fire and building codes, and ensuring adequate code enforcement is really working for all New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you. Schulman.
Aye on all.
Stevens.
Aye on all.
Ung.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Velasquez.
Aye on all.
Vernikov.
Aye on all.
Williams.
Permission to quickly explain my vote.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say for the record how excited I am and privileged to vote to appoint Mr. Hogan, who was my camp director. He reminded me when I was 8 years old, not 10 years old. It's just a full circle moment, and with that, I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Juan.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Yeager.
Aye.
Borelli.
Aye on all.
Powers.
Aye on all.
Speaker Adams.
Aye on all.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you so much. I just want to disclose on the record that my brother is an adjunct lecturer at CUNY. Thank you.
Before I announce the vote, I just want to, I think we had to go to Councilmember Williams and then Councilmember Carr. Go to Councilmember Williams first.
I know, I wish we could just say, for all things CUNY, for the record, I am a student.
At one of the best CUNY schools of them all, I might note. We'll also go to Councilmember Carr. Councilmember Carr. All right, we'll let him come back. I think we have Councilmember Feliz.
I too would like to disclose that I'm an adjunct professor in the CUNY system, Hostos Community College in the Bronx. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Councilmember Carr here to make a disclosure? Does anybody else want to disclose something? Okay. We have Councilmember Stevens.
Yes, I would like to also disclose that my daughter is a full-time CUNY student at Baruch College.
Yeah.
So we have to all open up that we went to CUNY? I went to CUNY too. So we all say CUNY?
Okay, we'll go ahead and read the vote. Okay, we're going to go ahead. All items on today's general order calendar are adopted by a vote of 51 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, with the exception of preconsidered M64 and Resolution 175. Those were adopted by a vote of 47 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, 2 abstentions. Land use votes 48 and 49 with accompanying resolutions, 49 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. 50 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, apologies. M49 and 60 with accompanying resolution, 50 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. M65 and Resolution 176 adopted by a vote of 49 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative, and 1 abstention. We are now going to move into the discussion of resolutions. We have one member signed up. We're going to go to Councilmember Williams, who I think has gone to the bathroom. Then in that case, we will move into the voice vote on today's resolution. If you wish to vote against or abstain from today's resolution, please notify the Legislative Documents Unit by email or approaching the dais before the vote. If anybody would like to speak, we'll give them a moment to sign up or raise their hand. We are now going to read today's resolutions into the record. Resolution 121 calls on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign Senate Bill number 1553C and Assembly Bill number 6399B, the Clean Slate Act. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, please
Aye.
say. All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We're now going to. We're now just going to clarify for the record M49. Just gotta hold on for 1 second. Just clarifying, M49 and 60 with accompanying resolutions was 50 in the affirmative and 1 abstention. Thank you. We are now going to move into today's general discussion. We have a long list. I'm going to enforce the 2 minutes. So please, when you hear that bell or see the time coming, please begin to wrap up. We're going to start with Councilmember Kagan, followed by Councilmember Riley.
Thank you. For many years, New York City Housing Authority leaders and property managers explained all issues and problems of that troubled agency by chronic disinvestment of public housing by federal government. It is true that NYCHA needs billions of dollars from assistance from Washington, D.C. for its capital needs. But lack of funding cannot explain or excuse countless examples of ignorance, incompetence, pure laziness, or complete disregard of tenants' complaints, requests or concerns, lack of proper notifications, lack of attention to simple questions about basic repairs, or lack of presence by NYCHA managers at some tenant association meetings. I represent Coney Island and also Marlborough houses and continue to be frustrated and outraged by receiving daily complaints from New York City Housing Authority residents about broken elevators, locks, intercom systems and mailboxes, lack of heat and hot water and cooking gas, mold and water leaks in apartments. Even simple requests are ignored and getting any response only after aggressive intervention by myself or my tireless staff. It is absolutely unacceptable. That is why I introduced a resolution, NYCHA Accountability Act, co-sponsored by many of my great colleagues, and it calls for New York State Legislature and for HUD to make NYCHA property accountable. Without any accountability and transparency, NYCHA will not reform itself. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Councilmember Riley, and then we'll hear from Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Roberto Drury, Marcus Morrison, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter Jr., Geraldine Talley, Celestine Chaney, Hayward Patterson, Catherine Massey, Pearl Young, and Ruth Whitfield. They were mothers, fathers, wives, husbands, daughters, sons, sisters, and brothers. They were family and friends. They were members of our community. On May 14th, a routine visit to the neighborhood supermarket turned into tragedy by this terror attack blatantly targeting people that look just like me. On behalf of the BLAC caucus, we pray for the victims of this horrific attack. We pray for the safety and healing of those injured. We pray for the support of family, friends, and loved ones, and all those affected. And we want to say enough is enough. This country's deep-rooted history of racism, hate, and with no present unified counteraction continues to make room for these domestic attacks. White supremacy is terrorism, and there is a vicious cycle where mass shootings, domestic terrorism, and hate crimes continue to live within our country. We are tired. Black people are tired. More must be done as a society to denounce racism, white supremacy, and domestic terrorism. The Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, passed by the House on Wednesday, is a step in the right direction, but an unsure one if the country remains divided. Mass attacks must not continually be coddled as mental illness or written off under the rights to bear arms. Resources, funds, and unified visibility against racism and domestic terrorism must be amplified across the levels of government, and the BLAC would like to stand with the neighbors in Buffalo during this hard time. And I am introducing Intro 421 today, which is requiring the Department of Homeland Services to report on families with children in shelter. And I'll just briefly just say I am proud to introduce this legislation today to produce a regular report, including, I'll be short, MJ, but not limited to the total numbers of families with children entering the shelter system, the average length of stay, and the total numbers of families leaving the shelter system. I would just like to encourage all my colleagues to sign on to this bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Riley. We'll now go to Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Nurse.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, Majority Leader, and my fellow council members. In honor of AAPI Heritage Month and the 1.1 million Asian American and Pacific Islanders who call New York City home, it is my privilege to introduce Resolutions 163 and 164 alongside council members Ung, Krishnan, Wan, and Hanif, which would require our schools to teach AAPI history, and also another resolution to recognize Diwali as a holiday. And with the rising increase in hate crimes in the Asian American community, I feel like education is one of the key ways to teach and fostering respect and understanding for our community within the public school system. And also, we cannot fully appreciate the gorgeous mosaic of New York City when 1/5 of our public school students observe Diwali but still have to make the painful choice between celebrating with their families at home or going to school. I'm also introducing Resolution 162 today, which calls for amendments to the New York State Public Service Law to address utility rate spikes. Average New Yorkers are already fighting through the pandemic and tough economy, and they should not have to struggle to keep the lights on and water running for their families. This resolution calls for the Public Service Commission to cap yearly increases in utility rates and to stop companies from passing on the bill to consumers. And finally, lastly, I'm introducing Intro 404, which would track the $256 million in settlement funds that New York City will receive thanks to the recent settlement reached by New York State Attorney General Tish James with opioid manufacturers and distributors. One New Yorker dies of opioid overdose every 4 hours, and over 100,000 Americans died in 2021 alone. And New Yorkers deserve to know how every cent of these settlements will be put to work as the administration fights this epidemic with opioid prevention and treatment programs. The bill will require the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene or any other agency administering funds to release a monthly report on the opioid settlement funds with details about the total money withdrawn from the settlement fund where the money is being spent. I encourage my colleagues to co-sponsor and sign this legislation and appreciate the Speaker's leadership in helping me bring these items to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. We'll go to Councilmember Nurse, followed by Councilmember Barron.
Hi, afternoon, colleagues. I'll keep it short. I just wanted to make a little pitch for some bills we're introducing. One is a bill on keeping and tracking yellow and brown grease. We want to keep that out of our waterways, make sure it's disposed of properly. All that French fry grease, let's keep it out of our water systems. Pretty easy. The next one I'm introducing with Councilmember Jen Gutierrez, which is a resolution asking the state and governor to pass a bottle bill, which would increase the redemption fee from 5 cents to go up to 10 cents. Which will really go a long way in helping our canning community, which is mostly women of color, undocumented folks. These are our environmental justice workers doing some of the most aggressive recycling out there. So really asking for your support on that. And then I am proud to co-prime a couple bills with Councilmember Osei on rat reporting. I'll let you introduce that more fully. And then a pitch for registration of community gardens with Councilmember Menon, which I know she'll also introduce. So thank you.
Thank you. And now go to Councilmember Barron, followed by Councilmember Caban.
My colleagues, I know everybody's expressing their condolences on Buffalo and going to say all the right things, and we should. But what outraged me most is this consistent behavior of the police when these white, racist murderers kill our people. Remember Dalen Roof, 2014? In the church in South Carolina, killed 9 people. When they rolled up on his car, the police had their guns drawn, and they asked him politely to get out of the car. He did, and then they put their hands softly on his back, handcuffed him while he was still yet standing, and since they had a 2-hour drive to the police precinct where he was going, they took him to a fast food place. And then this guy, Peyton Gendron, 18 years old, he murders 10 of us. What do they do to him? He's down on the ground with the gun pointed to himself like he was going to take his own life. And then they say, please don't, please don't. He gets up, they put their hands gently on his back, he stands up, and then they arrest him politely, still alive. Amadou Diallo didn't have a gun, didn't commit a crime, dead, 41 bullets. George Floyd didn't have a gun, didn't commit a crime, dead, knee in his neck, and killed him. Sean Bell didn't have a gun, not committing a crime. 50 bullets killed him. Tamir Rice, a toy gun, thought it was real, killed him. Michael Brown, no gun, no crime. They murder us and kid glove those who murder us as well. What signal are they saying to us? As we honor Malcolm X today, and if I take another minute, speakers, only because I was denied one, I want to read what Malcolm X said to us, and this is critical. He said, "We declare our right on this earth to be a human being, to be respected as human beings, to be given the rights of human beings in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary." We're going to have some emergency meetings in our community on security for us when we go to church, security for us when we go shopping. So it's time for Black people to stand up, and we have a God-given right and a constitutional right to protect ourselves, especially when this government isn't.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Caban, followed by Councilmember Joseph.
Thank you. I want to start by saying all too often we give our institutions of policing and incarceration unquestioning deference, even when they conceal the outcomes of programs they claim are data-driven. And that's why today I'm introducing Part 1 of the Light of Day legislative package aimed at bringing accountability and transparency to the criminal legal system. The first bill, on which I'm grateful for the partnership of our Majority Leader Keith Powers, would require the Department of Corrections to provide us with data on the educational programming, mental health services, and other community-based supports we provide to empower our neighbors in and returning from custody to reduce their risk of winding up in custody again. The second bill, on which I'm grateful for the partnership of Queensborough President Donovan Richards, would require the NYPD to produce monthly reports on police misconduct complaints they receive and actions they take in response, and to send those reports to the council and mayor, and to post them on the NYPD website. New Yorkers deserve accountability and transparency, and these bills will help chip away at the wall of secrecy the NYPD and DOC have built around their operations. So I encourage my colleagues to sign on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caban. We'll go to Councilmember Joseph, followed by Councilmember Osei.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I'm introducing 4 bills today. Introduction 399 will ban the use and sale of diesel-powered leaf blowers and lawn mowers. This is an important step towards achieving the city's goal of reducing our emission by 70% by 2030. These landscaping tools are not subjected to federal emission standards, and they emit extremely high level of pollutants into the air. More than 100 cities around our country have banned the use and sale of gasoline-powered leaf blowers and lawn mowers for the exact reason. And besides the real health hazard they pose to air quality, the machinery can also cause hearing loss as the machinery produces noise pollution that reaches 100 decibel. As we move into warmer weather, it's easy to forget how temperatures drop in the winter. Introduction 402 will codify the availability of warming sensors when city issues a code blue, warming for dangerously low temperature. Introduction 401 mandates the Department of Transportation to create speed bumps on roadways surrounding parks that have an area of 1 acre or greater. We must create physical barriers in order to reduce vehicle speeding. We know that car speeds all over the city, and we have to do more to protect New Yorkers, especially children. Introduction 402 requires Department of Education, Department of Parks, and the Department of Youth to establish a program of universal summer and youth programming for our city's youth. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to my co-prime sponsors, Councilmember Lynn Shulman and Councilmember Althea Stevens in Introduction 403, which requires the Department of Education to distribute application for ID NYC cards to all high schoolers at the beginning of the school year. There are some really great benefits that come with this ID card, and want to make sure all of our young peoples can access the free annual membership to all wonderful cultural institutions who are ID NYC partners. Thank you, and I ask for my colleagues to sign on to this important bill. Also, I wanted to wish a happy Haitian Flag Day to all that are celebrating 219 years of humanity, dignity, and Black excellence. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Councilmember Osei, followed by Councilmember Ressler.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Rats are a serious issue in our city, posing as a huge public health risk to our communities, especially Black and brown communities who are disproportionately impacted by rat infestations. In 2017, the former mayor released a rat mitigation zone plan to reduce the city's rat population in 3 of the most infested parts of the city. One area being Bedford-Stuyvesant, a neighborhood I represent in the 36th district. Despite this plan, rats still remain as a huge issue in our city. In 2021 alone, 311 received more than 21,000 complaints of rat sightings. And I know there's a lot more because I've never called 311 about seeing a rat. And in my office, rat sightings and infestations are one of the top issues my constituents have concerns about. We as a city need to do more and to fully understand the programs and initiatives undertaken to combat this public health issue. Today, I am proud to introduce Intro 414, along with council members Nurse, Botcher, Menon, Farias, Williams, Richardson, Jordan, Aviles, and Hanif. Under Intro 414, the Department of Sanitation will be required to report on their progress and work in the city's rat mitigation zones to the mayor and the speaker. This reporting requirement will allow us to understand the efficacy of the rat mitigation program and to help us address any shortcomings of the program. Our constituents deserve safe and clean neighborhoods where they can live, work, and thrive in. And to do this, we need to fully address the rat infestation issues in the city. I urge you all to sign on and pass Intro 414 so we as a council can work towards making our communities cleaner and safer for all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Ressler, followed by Councilmember Stevens.
Great. Thank you very much, Majority Leader. Today, we biked, that's Council Members Hanif, Hudson, Juan, Gutierrez, Caban, Powers, Marte, a couple borough presidents and a controller. We all biked into work in the rain to lift up the need for safe streets. And earlier this month, though, traffic violence killed 6 New Yorkers in just 3 days. The streets plan can't come soon enough, but even with promised funding, implementation will be far too slow. That's why I'm introducing legislation at the request of Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso and a coalition of 19 council members and 4 borough presidents that would streamline the process of implementing new bike lanes. Intro 417 would give council members and community boards a meaningful opportunity to provide input on proposed bike lanes and then allow the Department of Transportation to move forward expeditiously once the public review phase has completed, removing an unnecessary 45-day wait period. In my district on Schermerhorn Street, one of the worst bike lanes in New York City, DOT is presenting to the community board tonight, and we need them to get to work tomorrow. I'd also like to mention a resolution I'm introducing today. I'm joined on that by Queensborough President and former Environmental Protection Chair Donovan Richards, current Environmental Protection Chair Jim Gennaro, BLAC Co-Chair Kevin Riley, and my colleagues in leadership in the Progressive Caucus, Council Members Hanif, De La Rosa, and Gutierrez. Resolution 169, the Climate Plan to Protect New York. New York State doesn't have emissions reduction goals. We have mandates. They are the strictest in the nation. To get there, we can take no half measures. This resolution calls on the State Climate Action Council, which is drafting the plan to meet those mandates, to take city council measures like Local Law 97, the gas ban hookups, statewide, centering equity and prioritizing EJ communities, and refusing to slow down for fossil fuel companies. The climate crisis is the existential threat of our time, and this is our opportunity to leave. I hope you'll join me in co-sponsoring both. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Stevens, followed by Councilmember Hanif.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to introduce 3 pieces of legislation today that will center around young people. In Intro 437 will improve young people adult access to voter registration material by requiring Department of Education and the Board of Elections to provide students with registration material in diverse languages. This legislation is important to continue the fight to get young people civically engaged. If we want young people to be involved in the democratic process, we need to make the process more open and accessible for young people. When I worked with young people, many of them felt that their voices didn't matter or the candidates didn't care about them. Today, I'm here to tell them and young people across the city that all of your voices matter and you do have a voice with your elected officials, and we're here to fight with you and make sure your voices are heard. I'm also pleased to introduce Intro 438 with Councilmember Gutierrez, Brewer, Feliz to waive park permit fees for schools and children and daycare centers across the city so young people have better access to learn, grow outside. And Intro 436 to create a juvenile detention advisory board to ensure that justice-involved youth and their families have a seat at the table when decisions are made about them. And lastly, on one of my school visits this week, I had with elementary school students. The young people asked me to do something about the violence in their community because they felt scared and they don't feel safe. This hurt my heart because for the last 20 years, I have spent my life to ensure that young people felt safe, loved, and heard. But at the moment, I was unable to comfort them. As we are in the thick of budget season, let's remember to invest in our communities to ensure that our young people feel safe, heard, throughout our city. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Councilmember Hanif, followed by Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you. Today I'm proud to join with Councilmember Krishnan and Public Advocate Williams in introducing Resolution 161 in support of Assemblymember Epstein and State Senator Kavanaugh's legislation in Albany that would allow for the safe retrofitting and legalization of basement apartments in New York City. Right now, there are thousands of New Yorkers living in basement apartments currently classified as illegal. The vast majority of these residents are working-class immigrant New Yorkers who cannot afford other types of housing. Because these units are illegal, these tenants often do not report unsafe conditions out of fear that they will lose their homes. This dynamic has devastating results, as we saw last September when flooding caused by Hurricane Ida killed 11 people who were living in basement apartments. As we head into the summer and the threat of more storms loom on the horizon, we must do everything we can to prevent a repeat of this tragedy. The state bill in question will allow for a citywide program to bring these units into compliance with critical state safety standards and end their illegal status. This is a win for all involved, which is why so many stakeholders, including Mayor Adams, AARP New York, Chaya CDC, and Housing Justice for All, have given the bill their full support. I strongly encourage my colleagues to sign on to this resolution.
Thank you. We'll hear now from Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I too want to wish Raju Manuel and thank him. I remember when you came from Community Board number 5, and you were great there, and you were great here, and we're going to miss you. And I, along with, I think, Councilmember Sanchez, we were at Bethel Gospel Assembly Church when Speaker Adams spoke so well about Buffalo, and I just want to thank her for that. So there are 3 bills. One would 382 is the intro, and again, it would add to the language support for small businesses so that when they are dealing with the city, there is enough language access available. Number 2 is 383, and this is building on vacancy of commercial storefronts. And I passed a bill a long time ago that said that the Department of Finance storefront properties data set, and it is a data set, but it has many defects. And this would hopefully make them more able to be updated, information that would significantly make it more helpful to business owners, policymakers, and community members so that people would know where, when, square footage, last rent, et cetera. And third, with Councilmember Stevens, Gutierrez, and Feliz, the issue of nonprofits working in schools. It is a challenge when you have to pay a ridiculously high permit fee, and it makes no sense for the nonprofit in the school, and we want to have an online system for school permit applications. There are so many issues regarding the use of public schools. It makes no sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll go to Councilmember Brooks Powers, followed by Councilmember Sanchez.
Who was it?
And we'll move to Councilmember Sanchez, and we'll come back to Brooks Powers.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Today, I'm introducing legislation alongside Councilmember Stevens, Farias, and De La Rosa, codifying and expanding the heat sensor pilot program that passed in this council in 2019. Intro 434 would require the Department of Housing Preservation and Development to identify 150 Class A multiple dwellings per borough based on factors including the number of temperature violations, heat-related complaints every 2 years. And I don't want to go too long, but just to say that the pilot that Councilmember Richie Torres and then Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams passed was extremely successful. 56% of buildings that, sorry, you lose your breath when you got the kid in you. Okay. But the pilot was very successful. And both buildings that complied and installed the heat sensors saw huge reductions in the number of heat violations, and also even the buildings that did not comply saw huge interventions or reductions in the number of heat violations. And so I want to ask my colleagues to join me here. This is a behavioral intervention on these buildings that could make meaningful difference for tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Juan, and then we'll come back to Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you so much. Today I'm introducing two bills, Intro 440 with Councilmembers Menon and Gutierrez, and 441 with Councilmember Williams, Menon, and Gutierrez as well. Intro 4, both of them are going to make our city more technologically accessible and a connected place despite anyone's income level. Intro 440 would mandate that city do a full review of public spaces such as museums, libraries, hospitals, or schools under its purview to recommend locations that are suitable for free, secure, and quality internet to anybody who needs it. And Intro 441 would require that the city identify users for user research as well as feedback for digital applications that are developed and perform comprehensive user testing to ensure that the applications function appropriately and is easy to use for anyone that needs it. So any sort of app or services, benefits that are served on the internet, on the website, or on the mobile will have to have user research that is documented and made public for transparency to make sure that the applications and the websites that we create are digitally literate and easy for anybody to use despite their level of digital literacy, as well as making sure that they are mindful of language access for second language speakers, and make sure that the apps are actually built for the intended user at hand. So I would like to call upon my colleagues to sign on to both Intro 440 and 441 to start our city's journey to take responsibility for connecting our communities to the internet and make sure that the applications that we create are actually serving the people that need them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brooks Powers, followed by Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you. First and foremost, I'd like to address the tragic news out of Buffalo this week, where a shooter killed 10 people and injured 3 others. We know that this horrific shooting was racially motivated, targeting innocent Black people in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and spurred on by conspiracy theories rooted in white supremacy. Not only are these forces destabilizing our nation's politics, they are inflicting unspeakable violence on our nation's communities of color. We must recognize these actions for what they are, and we must condemn them in the strongest possible terms. This violence must be stopped, and we cannot allow this to happen here. I'd also like to acknowledge the bill I introduced this week with Councilmembers Lee, Osei, and Lewis, which would create an Office of the Homeowner Advocate within HPD. This office will help homeowners get answers to their financial questions and get the help they need from city agencies. As I have always said, home ownership is a cornerstone of the American dream and a key step in the process to building and passing along generational wealth. And this is particularly true for families of color who have been historically locked out of wealth building opportunities. This council must pursue every avenue to support our city's homeowners, and I urge my colleagues to join us in making this office a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Rivera, followed by Councilmember Gennaro.
Thank you so much. New Yorkers are many things, but there's no question that we are some of the hardest working people around. In New York City, our work is our community, our family, friends, our union. Working New Yorkers are as critical to the fabric and function of the city as something like the subway. Today, I'm introducing legislation to support our city's workers. My freelance and domestic worker safety training bill will direct the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection to create a program providing certain workers with safety training from everything to first aid and CPR training to information on protective equipment and cleaning hazards. The second requires the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to inform low-wage workers throughout New York City about health insurance in an effort to increase enrollment. To further protect these workers, I'm also introducing legislation calling on our state and federal colleagues to take action. One resolution urges Congress to pass legislation that would guarantee domestic workers receive the same protections and rights as all other workers under the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. The second calls on the state legislature to pass an act amending the insurance law requiring every individual or group policy that covers maternity care also make a provision for abortion care. New York has set the curve for supporting our most marginalized workers. I hope you will join me in continuing to honor that precedent by signing on to this legislation to keep them safe. New Yorkers work for our city. We must ensure that our city works for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we hear from Councilmember Gennaro, followed by Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Everyone knows that this week President Biden made the appointment of Corinne Jean-Pierre as White House press secretary. What my colleagues don't know, which I want to tell you about, is that she started her career at the New York City Council. She was an environmentalist early in her career, and her first job was with us. She worked for me when I was, chair of the committee back then in 2004, 5, and 6. She did a great job. She's, very historic on many, many levels. And in her 2019 memoir, she talked about her time at the City Council. I guess it's only Councilman Brewer and Barron that actually were around and worked with her. But she was a great asset for the council, and she's gone on to be White House press secretary. And I guess it's only appropriate that she was appointed in the same week as Haitian Flag Day. So I just wanted my colleagues to know that that this great woman came from the council. That's where it all started. So there you have it. Thank you very much. I also wish to thank Councilman Ressler for his leadership with regard to the reso on the CLCPA. That is very important, and I appreciate his great leadership. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Williams, followed by Councilmember Krishnan.
With just weeks remaining in this year's legislative session, we are asking our state lawmakers to prioritize this urgent legislation, Clean Slate, as a means of economic justice. Our state has built a criminal justice system that treats people as disposable and has led to mass incarceration. As we know, mass incarceration disproportionately affects people of color and low-income communities, leading to systematic racial disparities in every aspect of our society. Because of racism in policing and prosecution, 80% of New Yorkers with conviction records are Black or Latinx and face lifelong discrimination in jobs, housing, and education. Today, when a person successfully completes their sentence, they return to their community only to find that doors are closed to them in perpetuity because of their conviction record. This makes it difficult for them to find employment or housing and creates instability at home, which can lead people back into crime. Clean Slate is an issue of economic justice and opportunity. New York collectively loses $2 billion in wages annually because formerly incarcerated individuals are barred from entering the workforce. That is why Fortune 500 companies like Verizon, JP Morgan Chase, and Microsoft support Clean Slate alongside many labor unions and advocates. Clean Slate will be transformative for the 2.3 million New Yorkers who have been disproportionately impacted by criminalization, especially those who face barriers to employment due to these convictions. The Clean Slate Act will strengthen families, communities, decrease recidivism, and increase safety. It will restore balance by providing opportunities for people with criminal records who have served their time and are ready to be productive members of our society. As chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, I'm proud to be the sponsor of Reso 121 that we all passed, that will provide individuals a fair opportunity at education, housing, and an equitable chance in the job market. They are ready to be productive members of society. I want to thank Central Staff Jay Suri, Jeff Baker, state sponsors Senator Myrie, Assemblymember Cruz, and Speaker Adams for her leadership, and lastly, Public Advocate Jamani Williams for requesting this resolution to be brought before the City Council. It's time to end perpetual punishment. Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Krishnan, followed by Councilmember Menon.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. I just wanted to speak briefly about two resolutions. Resolution 161, introduced by my colleague and prime sponsor, Councilmember Hanif, as well as Public Advocate Williams, is a crucial measure to actually provide and create badly needed affordable housing in our city. By legalizing basement apartments and the state legislature enacting this bill, it is a way to not only create affordable housing, but to protect tenants, so many, especially immigrant families, like in my district of Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, who are already living in basement apartments with no protections whatsoever. From storms that we faced to issues of tenant harassment, it is clear that tenants in basement apartments need protections, and to do so would also help small homeowners as well pay their mortgages too. So legalizing basement apartments benefits everybody, and it's a crucial housing protection that's needed. And so we are urging our colleagues in state government to ensure this legislation passes as soon as possible. Finally, I just want to add my support and excitement about the resolution introduced by Councilmember Lee and others calling on the Department of Education to make Diwali a school holiday. This is something obviously very personal and meaningful to me as the first Indian American on the New York City Council. Diwali is such a special holiday across our South Asian communities, symbolizing light over darkness for many, New Year as well, and so many other meanings across our South Asian community. This is a key way to ensure that so many children, like I was once myself, who didn't have the opportunity to celebrate this holiday during the school year, now have the opportunity to finally do so. So we would urge the DOE to adopt it as a school holiday. It is very special for our South Asian communities. Thank you.
Thank you. I hear from Councilmember Menon, followed by Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Majority Leader Powers. I'll be very brief. We have all had vacant, derelict lots in our districts that have become an eyesore for the community. The bill I'm introducing today, Intro 411, along with Councilmember Nurse, would allow third-party entities like civic organizations and not-for-profits to register private property vacant land with the Parks Department to create community gardens. After the owner of a vacant lot would give consent, the location could be included in Green Thumb community garden programs. Expanding New Yorkers' open space is of utmost and paramount importance, and what better way to beautify these abandoned lots than to create a community garden. I am also introducing Reso 166 along with Councilmember Brennan and Abreu, which calls upon New York State to implement a temporary sales tax holiday for New York City. The temporary suspension of sales tax would increase small business revenues by decreasing the price that consumers are paying for certain products. This is not without precedent. This was done after 9/11 to help lower Manhattan small businesses, and this would truly help small businesses recover from the pandemic. So I urge my colleagues to sign on to Reso 166 and Intro 411. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to hear from Councilmember Lewis now, followed by Councilmember Frias. If anyone else wants to sign up, they can raise their hand on Zoom or come up and let us know. So we're going to hear from Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Today, I would like to briefly discuss 3 pieces of critical legislation that I'm introducing today on maternal mortality and morbidity, another calling on the New York State Legislature to make necessary provisions for survivors of domestic violence, and the last on sightings of city facilities. The first introduction is Introduction 409, a local law to amend the administrative code of the City of New York in relation to increasing access to data and maternal mortality and morbidity. According to the maternal morbidity review of New York City, our city suffers the highest rates of maternal morbidity in the history of the country at a rate of 26.6% compared to New York State with a rate of 18.1%. This bill would provide valuable insight into the issues birthing New Yorkers have endured due to disparities and inequalities of maternal health care that will help identify areas where we need to provide equity, resources, support for our birthing people and their families. Resolution 165 calls on the state legislature to pass and the governor to sign, authorizing certain shelters for victims of domestic violence to be reimbursed for any payment differential for housing a single individual in a room intended for double occupancy. This is important to me because as a survivor of domestic violence, I profoundly understand the pain and uncertainty lived by victims of these crimes. I have therefore made it my mission and a priority to champion for victims of domestic violence. People experiencing domestic violence often become prisoners within the confines of their homes. I was one of them. allowing survivors of domestic violence a pathway to freedom from constraints, fear, and inability should be a priority not only for the council, but for our partners upstate. And the last bill is Introduction 405, a local law to amend
Time expired.
the New York City Charter in relation to creating an online posting requirement for statements outlining consistency or inconsistency within the criteria established for the sightings of city facilities. The key measure is trust and transparency. Let's no longer hide our city's processes. As such, it is our duty to make sure all sightings fulfill city standards equitably. I urge my colleagues to sign on to Intros 409, 405, and Reso 165. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can hear from Councilmember Frias, and then we'll hear from Councilmember Richardson Jordan. Thanks.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I just really quickly wanted to highlight two of my colleagues' efforts this week, Council Members Schulman and Menon, who put together a letter regarding baby formula and urging the mayor to sign an emergency executive order that can suspend procurement laws and regulations to expedite the purchasing of infant formula, and to send city inspectors to retail stores to ensure there aren't any price gouging in our community. Right now, we are seeing this massive impact for not only women, but our families. And I just wanted to highlight their efforts as Women's Caucus members in putting together a bipartisan letter to the mayor, and urge the rest of our colleagues to reach out to either one of their offices to sign on and push efforts. I received photos from families and saw them myself in my local stores that there are no formulas on the shelves, and it is an urgent need and will only continue to be exacerbated if we do not act. So please, I urge all of you to help us push this effort towards the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll finally hear last, unless anybody else signs up, we'll hear from Councilmember Richardson Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. I am excited to introduce a slew of legislation today. Two I'm co-prime on, so I'll echo some of what's already come up with Councilmember Nurse 413, which is going to allow us to track and ensure the follow-up and enforcement for the disposal of harmful grease. It sounds small, but it is going to have an environmental impact. And in that same vein, I'm also co-prime on 414, which Councilmember Osei already spoke eloquently about how we're going to address the onslaught of the rats. And I'm also proud to introduce 420, which is going to eliminate costs associated with installing solar panels. We should address the economic disparity and racial disparity when it comes to environmental justice, make it so solar panels, there's just access to that green technology for everyone. Introducing 419, which ensures that HRA and HASA work in conjunction together to update and publicize HIV/AIDS services. So this is a little bit technical, but this is a vulnerable population, those who are in need of service, and HIV/AIDS survivors were definitely also impacted by the pandemic, so let's not forget about that group. And 418 is to establish a drag laureate. This is an ambassador for LGBTQ nightlife. As a Black queer woman, I know what it is to feel invisible. Let's do the work to make sure that all corners of our city can be seen, be heard, be visible, and be incorporated. So this is an effort to really have an ambassador for that part of our LGBTQ community. And that's it in terms of bills. I will just urge my colleagues to please sign on to a letter that me and Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa have worked on for the TILs. TIL buildings are in need of support. This is a program, this was a promise to residents to be able to own and rehab their buildings, and we should fulfill the promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll now call on Speaker Adrienne Adams to close out today's stated meeting.
Thank you, Majority Leader. The stated meeting of May 19th, 2022 stands in recess.